Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, first off, I want to say I'm very thrilled to have you on the show. I've been a big fan, for a long time, and it's great to have a chance to finally speak with you.
Oh gosh, well, thank you. I appreciate your help with the album and everything. So,
Well, let's get right into it. And you just mentioned the album right there, and it's fantastic. I had a chance to listen to the tracks, and I'll tell you what, just listening to the tracks, I've listened to the entire album probably 3 or 4 times. That's how good it is. I'm very, very impressed. Excellent album.
cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Your early feedback on it. So I've only had feedback from maybe, a couple people. So
Well, that's good. You have 2 videos out so far, Far Too Deep and Torn Into Lies, and they're both excellent songs. And I think it's a great representation on, this album, and a great way to kick it off to have listeners, kind of be introduced to what they're actually going to hear here.
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting album to try and promote because, there's a wide variety on it, I think, of music. So, people can kind of have knee-jerk reactions when they hear Far Too Deep and go, oh, okay, so everything's gonna be really heavy on the whole album. And it's like, no, not really. I mean, there's kind of a wide variety of stuff. So I would say that there's that represents the heavier edge, and Torn Into Lies is more of a ballad that kind of veers off a little bit into a little bit of a jam. And so I think, there's a couple ballads, as you know, on it. But I'd say there's stuff on there that's like kind of Zeppelin influenced and AC/DC influenced. And so, there's a little bit of variety, but at the end of the day, it's classic rock, man. It's melodic classic rock. And sometimes it goes heavy and sometimes it's a little bit more on the ballady side. So those two kind of represent, I'd say, almost like the extremes of it,
Right, it's great. You mentioned the diversity in the album too, and I think that's what I like most about it, because it's, it kind of takes the pieces of the first 2 records and brings them together, and with like Crash of Life, the opening, or the album title song, and Not Tonight, which is my favorite song. It's got that really good chorus, hook driven, but it's the diversity, and I kind of think that has to go with Girish a little bit on vocals, which I think is a great fit here.
Yeah, I mean, that was my only concern, like going in, because Frontiers said, well, what about this guy, and they sent me a video of Girish and the Chronicles. I was like, well, I mean, he's outstanding. He's, screaming his ass off and major range and everything. But I kind of needed to see, like, my whole model has always been that, somebody being able to sing Ronnie James Dio all the way to like Paul Rogers or Luke Graham on these things, that kind of ish, doing their own thing with it. But like that, that's kind of represents the vibe, right? It's so I've always been saying Dio-ish at its heaviest and Foreigner-ish at its lightest. So once Girish started doing everything, I was like, wow, he can really do it all. He's a real chameleon. And able to hang. So he ends up being a really good fit for this project, because that's at the end of the day, that's what I like too, man. I've always been a fan of the albums that where not all 11 or 12 songs are like carbon copies of each other. That's always just been a little bit like, why is that the norm? I don't know. I want to have a variety of my influences represented when I do these records, as they're kind of my only opportunity to have my songwriting statement. So I don't like pigeonholing myself too much on it and being like, oh, this is all he's into kind of thing,
Right.
I just feel like there are other fans out there, I think, that are like me, and where their tastes in rock, I would say, went all the way from like mellower bands like Journey or Foreigner that were melodic and had really great songs, maybe not, super heavy or anything, but that kind of spanned all the way up to Metallica for me, like the heavy bands where there was still melody, like especially like the Black Album or something, that kind of is like, that represents kind of the scope of what I was into, and everything in between, which there's a ton in between those 2 things, right? So
That's right.
you know, I like to just think of myself as that's what I was into. So I kind of like to be able to represent, you know, those vibes on these records.
I think you do it well too with all three of these, and in listening to this one, you get a little taste of like you said, all those different bands, and I think it's represented well here because there's the melodic side, the heavy side, and I think Girish, like I said, brings that little bit of a flair to the album.
I think that, you know, Girish brings like a youthful energy to it, which I think is really cool.
Right.
You know, I think he's like young and hungry, and just even in his willingness to promote the record and do the videos, etc., was very helpful, and not something I've necessarily had in the past. And so that goes a long way. And he was really open to, you know, anything I had to say about like, hey, you know, maybe not as, you know, I don't know, screamy on that one, or the, you know, certain times I really love it when he does it. It's not like I don't want him to be like a screamer and stuff, you know, because he's amazing at that. It's just that some of the material kind of requires kind of more like sing the song kind of approach, you know.
Right.
So which he's amazing at when he goes there. So it was really amazing going through the process with him because he nails everything. I mean, he can really do it all.
I agree, and you know, with this being the third album, when you go into the studio, say with this one or however you guys do it, I know everything's a little different nowadays. You know, working from doing the music from home and sending tracks and things like that. What was it like the recording process for this one? You know, going in, was it something that you had like a set template in mind? You said, "Look, I wanted to do this," or is it, hey, I wanted to expand a little bit and do something different here a little bit?
I would say it was kind of like a conglomeration of things that I had. Some of this stuff I had written. Russell Allen and I were maybe going to do a band thing at one point, and so I had these riffs, and I was like, well, which ones fit? And so there's various writing sessions that I'll do for people, and I'll go through and sort of make a decision on whether or not I feel like it'll fit on the record. And then the rest kind of designated like right for the album. I did a lot more with this one. I did a lot more just basing a song on a riff, which kind of drove Vinny a little nuts, you know, because like Vinny was only getting like, you know, rhythm guitars. And I was like, he's like, but what are the vocals going to be doing? I'm like, I don't know yet. I'm like, just bear with me. I'm like, just jam, dude. I'm like, just rock out. You can kind of tell like where's a chorus and where's a verse, etc. And you know, what's the instrumental section. I was like, just it'll all be good in the end. You know, we'll all play around you and make sure we're not, you know, making you sound like you're, you know, whatever, doing a busy fill somewhere, and you know, it'll all be good. You know, so that was kind of the way it rolled this time a little bit more. There are certain songs where I'll begin and have a song like melody first in my head. It was a lot of riff first on this record, to be honest, you know, a lot of like guitar parts, and like I'll write the singing later, write the vocals and what the lyrics will be. So as you know, I do, that's like my main thing with these, is that I do all of that. That's kind of that's really the point, is like I kind of write everything on these in terms of what the singer's going to sing. And so I even go through and sing the whole album, and then Girish has like a guide vocal to listen to. And then, you know, he obviously just sings it a whole lot better than me. So like, you know, he'll go back through and be like, hey, you know, here's what I did. And so for the most part, as micromanaged as the writing is on my end, my production style is like polar opposite when it comes to what these guys do. I'm kind of like really hands off, you know? So I might suggest like a thing here or there, but for the most part, what everybody sends me is meant to be like their ability to make some kind of artistic statement on it, you know? Like, I mean, you don't want to hire people and be like, here's what I want you to play note for note. It's not like that, you know? Like people, when I say I write everything, I don't have the drum parts written out for Vinny. I just have the songs written, you know, like as far as like riffs and vocal melodies and lyrics and those are the songs. And then, but as far as like what Vinny's going to perform, or Tony, or Derek Sherinian, or even Girish, you know, Russell did a lot more of deviating from the script, so to speak, you know. So if I had a guide vocal for him, he would kind of do his own thing a little bit more. Girish went a little, in the end, went a little bit more verbatim of what was actually on my guide vocal. Like, I think if you guys heard it, you'd get a kick out of it, because it's like, well, there it is poorly sung, and there it is sung right, you know. So I think in the end, he just wanted me to be happy with it, which, you know, was cool. That usually what's on the guide vocal is what I'm really hearing. And it would take me a minute to get used to sometimes what Russ would do. You know, I'd go like, oh, that's different than I was hearing it. But in the end, you know, sometimes we cling too tightly to our ideas, and you just got to live with somebody else's twist on it for like a minute. And then you don't even remember what your initial idea was in the end.
Right.
I'm like, whatever, man, it's great. You know, as long as it's great.
You know, those guys got to love working with you like that, because it's, you know, when you go into a situation and you're under that, you know, the stress, but, you know, the talent that's around you, and obviously your talent, you know, to put that group together, and to be able to put the songs together and produce it as well. I mean, I think that says a lot for how excellent this album is. I mean, it came out, I mean, phenomenal. It's a great listen all the way through, and it really portrays how good, you know, your talent is, and mixes so well with these guys. It's a great fit.
Cool. Thanks, man. I mean, you know, my approach on these has always really been like, you know, to make it like something that basically comes off like a band, that sounds like I would want to listen to as a listener. Not necessarily like a self-indulgent guitar album. That's why I don't call him Joel Hoekstra, because, you know, people would expect like, oh, this is an instrumental album, or there's going to be like, you know, really long guitar solos. And there's really none of those. I mean, there's like not even a long guitar solo really on the record. It's all just kind of like, hey, these are just cool rock tunes. This is the kind of stuff that my influences that I grew up listening to, you know, just for really kind of obviously going back to what got me into rock in the first place. And you know, this is what my fan base was initially like craving from me, because my instrumental albums that I put out years ago were kind of out there, you know, kind of fusion-y, and I had an acoustic album. So it was like, I was getting a lot of like, hey, do you ever think about just putting out like an album that's like rock songs? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. I intend to, you know? And so that was, you know, my idea about the Joel Hoekstra's 13 thing was that like, hey, this can kind of be different than Joel Hoekstra. Like if I do Joel Hoekstra, that can be if I ever do an instrumental album again, I'll probably put it out just under that. And Joel Hoekstra's 13 is meant to be like, these are the rock albums.
I think it's great. And you talked about your, you know, influences, and, you know, reading up and the things that you've done in the past. I mean, you had a very musical family. Tell us about that, because I thought that was really interesting, the story behind, like, you know, growth, how you know, your family, you know, they were musicians, and, you know, and you transferred that, and it turned out very well on your end, that's for sure.
Oh, thank you. I mean, the bar was really high. You know, my parents were both amazing classical musicians. My mom's still alive. You know, my dad passed away, but both incredible musicians who could, you know, sight read anything and basically play anything. But they're very classical, like just solidly classical musicians, you know.
Right.
And out came this kid who like saw Angus Young and went like, that's the coolest person I've ever seen. I want to be him. And went to them and said, I want a guitar. I want to play guitar. And I think they were like picturing Segovia, you know, me doing the classical thing. And,
Right.
I did study classical guitar and spend, you know, some time doing that. I did, you know, a couple years designated to that in college, really just like playing classical more than playing rock even. But in the end, you know, the heart and soul of like what brought me into this is kind of what won out in my career and what ended up taking off. And so it was a very interesting road, because getting out of GIT, and venturing out into being a pro was right when the grunge era hit, and that just sort of changed everything, because it went like, oh well, all that's gone now, you know, like the playing with technique, and like, you know, you couldn't get arrested if you were going to be shredding in a solo anywhere. So it was
Right.
ended up being a good thing, because, you know, that really taught me how to be a pro and how to play with a lot of different people and kind of fight to have a career, as opposed to, you know, a lot of people that beat that window sold a lot of albums when they were younger and found success. And for me, it was this weird thing of like, okay, now I've got to just kind of build a career and learn to play with a lot of different people and find a way to make myself valuable, without falling back on technique, without being like, and look, you know, I can play fast or whatever, you know. And it ended up being really a good thing. Taught me how to be a much better musician in the end.
Yeah, and you're solid all the way through too. And I know a lot of people talk about, you know, like you said, the solos and just going out and shredding. But the foundation of these songs and everything that you do is the rhythm and the, you know, the great grooves that you put into this. And I think that really says a lot, because everything that you've been in and everything that you put out, you know, we as fans look at that and say, Joel Hoekstra, man, I know what I'm getting here. I know it's going to be solid all the way through. And that says a lot about what you've done, you know, throughout the course of your career.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be content releasing an album that only showcased like my guitar playing, you know. I mean, for me, that's not what these are. These are really meant to showcase like just cool rock songs and like rock that influenced me. That's all it's really about. And I mean, obviously I try and play, you know, good guitar on it. And, but it's not necessarily for me about being, proggy or like, you know, uber innovative or anything like that. It's just kind of like, I just want to write some cool rock stuff and like release cool albums. But, you know, I try to hold the bar really high, like across the board, as far as like what's expected on it, and have great players and have great playing on it. And I think in the end, you know, like if you take it and you take the quality of all the performers on there, you mentioned Girish and everything, and, you know, obviously, you know, all these guys, you know, Vinny and Tony and Derek. And I mean, for Christ's sake, I got Jeff Scott Soto singing background vocals on the album. You know, I mean, it's like, I just try to give people like a really high quality rock record, you know, but not have it be high quality in that, wow, how are they playing this complex material? It's more like, no, we're going to keep it like simple rock, like I grew up listening to, but we're just going to do it really, really well.
It's very memorable too, you know, when you listen to the tracks. And I consider you, you know, one of the hardest working guys in the business, you know, for so many things that you do and how you adapt to that. And, you know, when I look back at the, you know, kind of like when you were just starting like playing the live shows and you got in with Night Ranger, tell us a little bit about that, because I thought that was a great fit with you and Brad Gillis, you know, as a team.
Yeah, so that kind of happened through Jim Peterick, who, you know, he founded Survivor and Ides of March, and obviously, you know, wrote Eye of the Tiger and all those mega hits, Vehicle, and all of, you know. So Jim had these events. I was in suburban Chicago, not far from Jim, actually, just like a couple exits down on the highway, like 10-minute drive or something. And so he started having me in to do some sessions and put me in the house band for his events called World Stage, where that was a great opportunity for me, because here I am in suburban Chicago and I was getting to play these concerts where like these people would come out and play their hits and maybe even a new song if they wanted, but, you know, getting to play with, you know, Kevin Cronin from REO and Alan Parsons and Don Barnes from 38 Special and Kip Winger, and it's a really, really long list of people that did that. Tom Kiefer from Cinderella, you know, just a bunch of guys. And one of the guys that did it every year was Kelly Keagy from Night Ranger. So that's where I would see Kelly like once a year. We'd play these Night Ranger songs, and then it was maybe about the 7th year that we did it. By this time I lived in New York, and I was kind of flying in and playing the songs like just the concert day, with no rehearsal. And so I became known as this guy who would come in with these 30 songs together or whatever, because these concerts were really long. And the song, like, have done his homework to the point where you could play the showdown. And so Night Ranger had a predicament where they needed to either cancel a show. Oddly enough, Reb Beach was playing guitar with them at the time. There was like a year between Jeff Watson and myself that where Reb was playing guitar with them. So Reb had a winger show. And so it was like, guys, I can't do this show. And so Kelly, I think, just said to the band, hey, I know this guy, man, that plays with Jim Peterick, that, you know, this guy learns like 30 songs and he gets off the plane, and like, you know, we won't need to rehearse him. He'll just, like, if we just tell him, show up and know this, we can do the show with this guy. And so that was basically my audition, was doing that at like a casino gig in Michigan with them in 2007. And basically that ended up getting me the gig. It's a little bit of the Reader's Digest version, you know, even though it's still a long story, but that's what got my foot in the door there with Night Ranger. And that kind of launched like 7 years or so with them.
And coming out of the Night Ranger, you know, gig, I mean, you did 2 albums with them, which I thought were both excellent. And I loved what you guys did there. He's going into Whitesnake. That's one of the things I wanted to get into too. What's it like writing with David Coverdale? I mean, you got into the band, and, you know, with Red Beach, so you had the familiarity right there with playing together. What was that like?
I'd say so joining Whitesnake was interesting because they kind of had the Purple album already in the works, and that was like, hey, we want you to play on this, but it was sort of established, like, this is what we're doing. And Reb had tracked a lot of that stuff is really just one guitar part, and then there was keyboards, and we weren't going to lean as heavily on keyboards, so it was a lot about me thinking, what can I do to fit in and make this sound like Whitesnake, make it a little bit different than the Deep Purple originals, put a unique spin on it. So I just came up with a lot of overdub ideas, obviously learned all the riffs. I shedded all the original versions. If David ever said, hey, how about just dropping down, you know, the solo off of the original? Okay, cool, whatever. But, you know, in the end, he really always just wanted us to play like ourselves on that and just kind of put our spin on those songs. And so that was great fun. And then as far as writing with David, that really began for Flesh and Blood. And you know, there was a couple songs where I would come up with the entire rhythm bed and say, like, these are the riffs that I came up with for this, and he rolled with it. But a generalization would be, the way it worked would be, David would have an idea and say, like, you know, I'm thinking this, and he kind of plays the riffs for you, and then maybe sings you a chorus and says, where do you want to go with it from there? And so that was the way we did the majority of Flesh and Blood, was David would have a song idea, and Reb and I, or maybe it was sometimes just me, sometimes just Reb, and depending on who was out there at the studio house at that time. And then we would just like complete the idea. You go down and demo it. So Whitesnake is still old school like that, where there's an actual demo of the song recorded, right? You know, and then cool. Once Tommy comes in and records drums, then it would go down for real. So, but that was really, it was a lot of like completing David's ideas more than anything, I would say, for Flesh and Blood. David had really more to do with the songs on Flesh and Blood, I would say, than Reb or myself. I mean, I guess that's a no-brainer, you know. With, you know, one thing about writing with David is that he definitely likes to write all the vocals, like any lyrics or vocal melodies, that's like his territory, you know, and rightfully so, no problems with that. But, you know, that's just sort of like where it is with that. You're not going to go in and say, hey, I've got this chorus, and sing it for him and say it goes like this. So they're like, no, like, I want to, yeah. So, but, and that's all cool. I'm always open to all these different writing methods, you know, that you go through with bands. And it was a lot. It was really kind of like that with Night Ranger too. The stuff they would include me on was like, you know, they wanted to have their stamp on those songs too. There was never going to be a song where I was going to come in and go, here's everything. Like, here's the riffs, here's the lyrics and vocal melodies. And
Right.
as I said, that's cool. You know, all these guys have spent a long time building up those bands, and they got the right to write their albums however they want. I'm just grateful they included me, to be honest. And that's across the board. Night Ranger including me a little bit on writing on those records, and David including me quite a bit, actually, writing on Flesh and Blood. And, you know, there's some of the band members were not, you know, invited to do so. So for me, I mean, that's cool that he even invited me in to participate.
That says a lot about you as a musician and a songwriter too, you know, to be able to work with these guys and them inviting you in. And I think that it kind of transitions well into, you know, the Joel Hoekstra 13 records. It's a great fit. You could tell that it transitions from Whitesnake to Night Ranger, you know what I mean?
It's my opportunity to be the dictator, right? And to be like, all right, here's everything. Here's how the song goes this time. So, I mean, I say it jokingly, but that is kind of the truth. And honestly, I'm okay with the other stuff. Like, it makes it sound like I'm not, but I am. Like, you know, with a project like Iconic, I'm writing the guitar riffs, but that's kind of it. I write the unarranged riffs. Michael Sweet arranges the riffs. And it goes to Alessandro and Nathan, and they write the lyrics and the vocal melodies. And so you get different results with different methods, and that's cool in the end. You know, in Revolution Saints, we're very little involved in it. You know, it's usually Alessandro Del Vecchio with an outside writing source kind of coming up and compiling the songs. And then our artistic stamp is like I'm talking about with these guys on my records, where it's like, hey, it's the performance. Like, I can play the parts and kind of put my stamp on it that way.
Right, right. And that's cool. And another thing I wanted to bring up was, you know, you played with so many different groups, different bands, different areas. And the one I wanted to bring up is playing with Cher. That was something. I mean, that's like an iconic rock music figure, and it's very diverse from, you know, Whitesnake and Night Ranger. What was that like?
Yeah, just something that came out of left field. You know, that's one of the things that I like to say, just work hard. And like, sometimes you'll end up doing things you never thought you'd be doing that actually end up being cool. You know, working with an iconic figure like her, you know, I mean, great, you know, great experience. And the other one is that, you know, doing Broadway with Rock of Ages. That's like two things I always say. When I was 11 years old playing Tony Iommi riffs, I never thought like I was going to ever do either one of those things. But like, you know, life can be surprising like that if you just work hard and you end up doing things that are actually really fun and cool opportunities. And I worked with some great musicians on both of those. And, you know, in the end, all I said, it's important to just kind of be open-minded and kind of roll with things as they come.
I think it's great what you've done. Like I said, with your career, I mean, like you said, hard work and dedication. That's why I said when I see your name attached to anything, I mean, I know there's hard work. And the amount of projects that you do is amazing, but you seem to have a good fit in all those areas, and that says a lot about your career and, you know, how you transferred into different things and your diversity as a musician.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of that I think goes back to that whole maybe not being able to do exactly what I set out to do, and having that 90s movement happen. That was in a lot of ways really good for me, because it made me play a lot of different styles, and it also made me kind of adapt to understanding this whole concept of teamwork and being able to be cool with fitting in, like, whatever my level of participation is going to be on something, be cool with it, be open-minded. And it is fun. It is fun to hear the different results, you know, like from Iconic, from Revolution Saints to Joel Hoekstra's 13, whatever it may be, Whitesnake, whatever my level of participation is, it's always kind of fun to hear the end result and kind of hear everybody's collective efforts, or, you know, something like this where I'm a little bit more dominant and, you know, like, this is going to be pretty much my baby, you know? So.
Right. I agree. I mean, I think it's great, everything that you've done. Like I said, you know, great guitar players, you know, do you do something that keeps your chops up? Say, you know, is this something where you rehearse something, or is it just, hey, you know, I go in and I practice or just play the gigs? Because like I said, with the amount of things that you're involved in, you know, is there something that you do special to just set aside some time and say, hey, you know, I'm going to practice this or work on this?
It's a lot of professional tasks these days. I mean, it's always kind of like what's up next, you know, like I played a night or two ago with the Rock of Ages band. And so, you know, review that set a few times, go play the gig. You know, I'm teaching a lot, which is good because it helps me kind of analyze my technique and chops and leads and like what I'm playing, and obviously recording, doing guest solos for people. And I just kind of find I have so many professional tasks that it kind of keeps me always working really hard on guitar.
That's great to hear, man. Like I said, it comes across with everything that you do. You know, when you look back over your musical career and the things that you've done, what are some of the things that you're most proud of that you look at and say, you know what, it's really cool that I did this?
So I'm not sure what time they gave you on the interview, just a heads up, but I do have a 10:30 as well.
That's what I was going to ask you. I knew we were getting close.
Yeah, I'm supposed to start, but maybe we could. What was the question? I'm so sorry.
Just you know, some of the things that you look back on in your career, you know, one of the things that you're most proud of that you accomplished.
Just that I made it this far, you know. I mean, it's something I set out to do when I was 11. So that's like, I always say to people, that's like, I want to be a baseball player kind of stuff, you know. So it's kind of nice to, whatever your dream was when you were 11 years old, to still at this age be doing it and have made it this far. And that would be pretty much my definition of success at this point in time, to just get through life doing it.
I think you did very well. And Joel, in closing, I just want to say thank you for joining Talking a Fast Lane, and I want to thank you for doing what you do as well, because you make me a better listener, a better fan, and I really appreciate you as an artist, and I just wanted to say that to you.
Oh, dude, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time, like helping out with the album.
Oh, you're welcome. I wish you the best of luck on the album.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Joel.
Speak with you next round.
You got it.
I wish we had more time. Sorry.
Oh, that's no problem. No problem. Best of luck, Joel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.